The Washington Post reports tonight the boxes of documents were moved into a storage area by Trump's body man, Walt Nauta, and another employee the day before the Justice Department came to get the documents. And that does not seem like a coincidence. Quote, on the evening of June 2nd, the same day the two employees moved the boxes, a lawyer for Trump contacted the Justice Department and said officials there were welcome to visit Mar-a-Lago and pick up classified documents related to the subpoena. Tonight, the New York Times adds that the other employee was a maintenance worker and that he and Trump's body man moved the boxes of documents back into the storage room before Trump lawyer Evan Corcoran conducted his own search of the room that day. So, Trump ordered his employees to move boxes of documents back into a storage room before his own lawyer, Evan Corcoran, conducted a search. And then later that same day, Corcoran called the DOJ, told them it was fine to swing on by. The following day, DOJ officials came by to pick up documents, as well as a signed attestation written by Corcoran, signed by Trump lawyer Christina Bobb, confirming that, to the best of her knowledge, a diligent search had been conducted, that they had turned over everything they found. Of course, we now know that was not the case. The FBI later found more than 100 more classified documents on the premises, even more at a storage site months after that. And one of the key questions of this investigation is, was that obstruction of justice? Was all the weird back and forth moving of boxes evidence of Trump trying not to give these documents back? Was him ordering these boxes moved before he had his lawyer search the room and trying to trick his own lawyers? Other than the scale, the sheer amount of classified documents Trump had, the thing that makes Trump's documents investigation such a stark contrast from President Biden's or even Vice President Pence's investigations is the appearance of obstruction. All signs indicate that Biden and Pence immediately and fully cooperated with authorities after being informed they had classified documents in their possession. The same simply cannot be said for Trump. The investigation into Trump here is a criminal investigation, so the bar for proving obstruction, it is high, and we're going to get some expert legal help unpacking all of this in just a second. The events of June 2nd, they weren't the only thing we learned about tonight. No, we also learned that Jack Smith's office has gathered evidence that even before Trump received the subpoena in May, he had what some officials have dubbed a dress rehearsal, removing government documents that he did not want to relinquish. And we learned that Smith's office had been told by more than one witness that Trump at times kept classified documents out in the open, in his Florida office where others could see them, and that he sometimes showed them to people, including aides and visitors. If you put all that reporting together, it certainly looks like Jack Smith is forming a case here. Now, NBC News has not independently confirmed any of this reporting. Former President Trump, of course, denies he did anything wrong. But this certainly does not look good for the former president. And it does seem like time is not on his side either. Tonight, Bloomberg reports that this investigation is coming to a close and that Jack Smith is poised to announce possible criminal charges in the days or weeks after Memorial Day. Joining us now, Lisa Rubin, MSNBC legal analyst, and Melissa Murray. She's a professor of law at NYU and an MSNBC legal analyst. Ladies, what a treat to have you both here tonight. We will get to the Bloomberg reporting on the possible timeline of an indictment in a minute. That would be our lead on any other night. But we have this reporting from the Washington Post and the New York Times a day before DOJ prosecutors show up at Mar-a-Lago, Trump having aides move boxes into a storage unit. What strikes you?
What strikes me is that Evan Corcoran was used by the former president and perhaps others in his orbit, right? We know from prior reporting that the boxes were actually moved out of that same storage area after the subpoena was served on May 11th. It now appears that someone, possibly former President Trump, took documents out of them, moved the boxes back in on June 2nd. Then that's when Evan Corcoran went in, conducted his search, and that evening called the Department of Justice and said, you guys should come by tomorrow and pick these up. That's because when the Department of Justice sent the subpoena, they said, in lieu of showing up to the grand jury, you can let us know where you found the documents and we will come and get them from you along with that signed certification that we now know was prepared and signed on June 3rd.
Talk to me about him potentially duping his own lawyer.
Again, making attorneys get attorneys. Like, obviously, Evan Corcoran is a legal professional. He has taken an oath. He has professional obligations. He cannot lie for the former president. And so the moving, the reshuffling of these documents, again, that seems like an attempt, again, we don't know if it's the case, but it seems very much like an attempt to allow Evan Corcoran to say, in all honesty, that he knows that there's nothing here, even though we know that now Donald Trump may have directed someone else to move those documents out of the place where Evan Corcoran was then going to do his search and then say to the department that everything was clear. So, again, the math isn't mathing here. You don't move those kinds of documents around with such alacrity and so frequently unless it looks like you're trying to do something funny. And that's the TLDR here. It just looks really suspicious.
Talk to me then about this idea of a dress rehearsal.
You know, the idea of a dress rehearsal comes from an opinion that we haven't seen yet. It's a sealed opinion about the crime fraud exception. That's the legal doctrine that allows a court to pierce an attorney-client privilege. And in this case, Judge Beryl Howell of the D.C. District Court apparently found in a lengthy opinion that Evan Corcoran had apparently been duped by Donald Trump and that there was enough evidence of possible obstruction by the former president as well as retention unlawfully of classified documents to justify piercing that privilege. That's the context in which the phrase dress rehearsal showed up. She said essentially the way in which Trump and his lawyers had interacted with the National Archives was the dress rehearsal. Remember, Alicia, the first time Trump was notified that the National Archives wanted these documents back, it wasn't last year. It was in May of 2021. And he has been playing footsie, essentially, with the federal government since then about the existence and location of these documents.
I'm a dance mom, so dress rehearsal says something very different to me. I want to come back to you on this concept of obstruction. The reporting would seem to bolster the idea that that's the key element the prosecutors are looking at. And the Washington Post reports, quote, people familiar with the situation said Smith's team believes it has uncovered a handful of distinct episodes of obstructionist conduct. That stuck out to me. Episodes.
I mean, again, more than one. And I'll just say, like, if you are a Dance Moms fan, Abby Lee Miller did have a federal case brought against her for similar kinds of machinations, right? Again, it's never the crime itself. It's always the cover up or moving things around or trying to obstruct the process that's undergoing here. And again, we've seen this play out in popular culture in lots of different ways. Think back to that movie, The Firm, when Tom Cruise is that lawyer who's caught up in like a terrible law firm that has ties with the mafia. And he says to the FBI agent, like, yes, I have mail fraud here. It's not sexy, but it has teeth. It's the same with obstruction. Is it sexy? Is it the same as proving that Donald Trump sold these documents or disseminated them to people who have interest against the United States? Certainly, it's not that sexy. But obstruction is still a federal crime, and it sticks.
Well, and it is part and parcel of having a complete disregard for democracy. I'm struck by this idea of the retention of documents, the obstruction piece of this, but then also this idea that he potentially had the documents out, was sharing them with other people. How does that factor in legally?
It's a separate violation. So the Espionage Act under 18 U.S.C. 793, for those following along at home, E of that statute basically prohibits sharing documents that you have in an unauthorized and unlawful way and then handing them or disclosing their contents to someone else. We have known for some time that Donald Trump unlawfully retained them. That's another violation of the Espionage Act. But here, when we're talking about sharing its contents, that's something different in kind and degree. If you're sharing them with aides, visitors, possible political donors, or even the foreign countries that we understand of interest to Jack Smith and his team of prosecutors with respect to Donald Trump's business dealings.
So one of the questions that we've been asking here is, who is it that's talking? And it would seem from this reporting that in addition to the body man who was moving the documents, you also had a maintenance worker who was cooperating with prosecutors. What is it that that maintenance worker could offer prosecutors?
Well, from what we understand from the reporting, the maintenance worker is one of the people on the videotape seen moving it. So he, if it is a he, is obviously someone who's already in some kind of legal jeopardy because he's actually there. There's evidence of him doing this. So he has a lot of incentive, if it is a he, to show the prosecutors that he has no intent to move documents. He doesn't know that these are classified documents. And so there's a lot of incentive, I think, for that person to work with the prosecutors to provide as much information. And being on the inside, the kind of person who sees things, who works in the interstices, but isn't necessarily a hotshot, a big guy at Mar-a-Lago, means that they probably observe things that might go unnoticed by other people and are really in a position to provide the kind of inside baseball knowledge that you probably couldn't get anywhere else.